welcome. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar series is for dairy and beef producers and veterinarians that would like to get more value out of their relationship with CentralStar. If you've joined us for previous episodes, you'll notice this one is a little different. Instead of a presentation, we'll engage in an interview-style conversation. I do still want you to type questions in the chat along the way, and we'll be sure to cover them. Don't be shy. You joined because you want to know more, and we want to give you the information you need. In today's episode, the journey to A2 milk, the inside scoop with MOO-ville Creamery and Select Sires will teach you MOO-ville's personal journey to become an A2 herd while creating a premier dairy product line, how to select A2 sires without compromising genetic progress, what to consider before transitioning your herd to produce A2 milk, and more. The goal is to provide you with the answers to many frequently asked questions surrounding the growing interest in A2 milk. We'll also guide you through the process of testing your herd if that's the path you choose. So let's get started with a few introductions. I'm Michelle Kaufman, the Customer Solutions Advisor for CentralStar Cooperative. I consult with producers to design testing strategies and implement results into real-world management decisions. To help us better understand A2, we have two guests with us today. The first is Chuck Sattler, Vice President of Genetic Programs at Select Sires. He's been with Select Sires for 23 years now and has been serving in his current role since 2004. Sattler grew up on a dairy farm in Wisconsin, received a bachelor's degree in dairy science and a master's degree in dairy cattle breeding from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He served as the Genetic Programs Administrator for the National Association of Animal Breeders, or NAAB, for 12 years prior to joining Select Sires. He now leads the dairy sire development efforts at Select Sires. Our second speaker is Carlisle Westendorp of the Westendorp family, which owns and operates MOO-ville Creamery and Westvale View Dairy, a 230-cow registered Holstein herd in Nashville, Michigan. In 2004, Carlisle's parents, Doug and Louisa, established MOO-ville Creamery, and today the entire family is involved in the business. All MOO-ville products are made on-site with the A2 milk from the Westvale View herd. Along with 4 retail sites, the MOO-ville brand is distributed in over 400 stores. In 2021 and 2022, MOO-ville Creamery was recognized as the best ice cream in America by the North American Ice Cream Association. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to join us today. Now let's get into it. So Chuck, we're going to start with you. Can you explain the genetic side of A2?
Yes, thanks, Michelle, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. So when we talk about A2 milk, we are referring to the type of beta-casein protein that is in the milk. So beta-casein is one of the major proteins, part of the casein group. There are 12 variants or 12 different types of beta-casein that can be found in cow's milk. The most common of these is the A1 and A2 variants that we commonly hear referred to, but if you did some detailed genetic testing or protein testing of the milk from the cows in your herd, you probably would find a few cows that had other variants other than A1 and A2. The type of beta-casein protein a cow produces in her milk is directly controlled by her DNA makeup. This means we can DNA test a cow or a calf and know exactly what type of beta-casein she will produce in her milk. So we don't need to test her milk for specific proteins, which is a good thing because running a protein profile on a sample of milk is a lot more expensive than running a DNA test. The beta-casein gene expression, the beta-casein gene expresses itself in an additive fashion. So cows with 2 copies of the A2 allele will produce milk that only contains the A2 protein, A2 variant of the beta-casein protein. Cows with 1 copy of the A2 allele and 1 copy of the A1 allele will produce a mixture, of roughly a 50-50 mixture of the A1 variant, beta-casein variant, and the A2 variant in their milk. So for a herd to supply A2 milk, the target for the herd owners would be to be sure that all their cows have 2 copies of the A2 beta casein allele.
Thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about why select sires chose to pay attention to A2?
Yeah, sure. We've been following the A2 research and learning about the role of A2 beta casein in the digestibility of milk for a long time, 20 plus years. To be honest with you, our thoughts have evolved over that time. I would say initially we had some reservations. We're investigating several of the scientific claims and questions regarding the benefits of consuming A2 milk, and there were some intellectual properties issues that caused us to be cautious about the whole issue early on, but ultimately it came down to customer demand. We had enough interest from dairy farmers, from our customers wanting to use A2 bulls. Some herds said, we're going to do this, and we want select sires to be our semen provider, so will you work with us or not? And so because of that demand, we got involved, and we've seen the demand steadily grow over the last 20 years. Operationally, our first step was to test the bulls on our lineup, the bulls that we were marketing, and make that information available to our customers. We eventually had it available on a request basis and gradually worked it into our publications in our sire directories and onto our website. And then more recently here, we've moved to where we are testing all our bull calves before we purchase them. So all the bull calves we're looking to acquire, we'll test them for the A2 genotype when we're doing the genomic test. And so we have that information and consider his A2 status along with all his other traits to help us decide which ones we should acquire and which ones we should bring to the market.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you. Carlisle, we're going to switch to you for a minute. Can you tell us a little bit about what made your family choose A2 for their operation?
We heard about it from some friends, didn't know a lot about it, and we were selling at the time about 60% of our milk and trying to figure out a way to be different and to be able to sell more milk. And then somebody brought up the A2 and did some research, and it's really big in Europe and Australia, and thought that would be a good avenue to try and push to be something different. That because milk is milk, you can get it anywhere. You got to be somewhere, something different to keep moving sales in the right direction.
Absolutely. So Chuck, we're going to come back to you for a second. Can you tell us, are there any genetic downfalls to choosing A2 bulls and creating an A2 herd?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's always trade-offs as you go through sire selection. When you emphasize some things, you need to de-emphasize others. So by requiring bulls to be A2, you do restrict your choices a little. But as the frequency of A2 bulls increases, the sacrifice is small. The good news is that the A2 gene does not appear to have any unfavorable correlations with other traits. And so this means that whatever your sire selection criteria is, whether it's net merit dollars or TPI or HHP dollars, when you sort the bulls for those indexes, you'll be sure to find several A2 bulls near the top of the list. So maybe a little bit of a sacrifice, but the genetic sacrifice would be very small at this point to find A2 bulls that meet your requirements.
I would definitely say that's something I've heard in talking to a lot of customers. Some of the early adopters say, when we first started doing this, it was hard to find bulls because there wasn't very many. But now as select sires and others are paying more attention to it and really looking for it, there's such a variety now that, like you said, there's not a whole lot you're losing out on because those A2 bulls are also so great in so many other things. And so, yeah, I think we're just opening the floodgates and finding all those A2 bulls and making it a lot easier for people to make that choice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, yeah, we've definitely increased the proportion of bulls available with that A2 genotype.
Mm-hmm. So, Carlisle, can you tell us what was the process like for shifting your herd to all A2?
Well, once we decided this was what we wanted to push for, luckily we had been kind of seeing in the bull books the A2 bulls and kind of picking them over another one if it was close. Then we had to go test the whole herd. Started with the cows using the Neogen ear notch and sending all them in. And luckily for us, CentralStar, or it might have been North Star at the time, was developing the milk sample. So we worked with them to, we sampled through the milk as well, and also confirming, because there was a lot of, I think you had to write the numbers down 3 times to make sure everything was right. And then once we knew the results, it was trying to keep breeding with the A2, but how long do you want it to take? And we decided we wanted to make it fast, so we started selling anything that wasn't A2, any of the A1 cows and any of the A2 cows. Once they were calving in, we were selling them to other dairies.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to keep the barn full, so we had a couple other friends that would let us test their cows and cherry pick the A2 cows to bring back and keep the barn full. But we sold a third of our herd, and that was tough. There were some good cows that left.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure it's not an easy decision, but once you set a goal, I mean, sometimes that happens. You've got some things that you got to struggle through to reach that goal.
Yep.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about how this decision has impacted your business?
As far as the dairy side, it's not much different. There's maybe, at the beginning, there wasn't as many bulls to pick from, and now it's pretty easy. Maybe a little harder on the selection. We're pretty picky on the genetics, so we try to use the top bulls and then siphon from there. As far as the creamery, we think it's helped. We probably get 4 or 5 calls a week asking about A2 or what it is, or if we carry it, or where the store is to try it.
Yeah.
But as far as the cows any different? No, everything there is basically the same.
Right. That's good. So Chuck, what kind of trends are you seeing in the purchasing of A2 bulls?
Yeah, we continue to see a slow but steady growth in the demand for A2 bulls. As Carlisle said, not just here in the U.S., but in Europe and New Zealand and Australia as well. I summarized our Holstein bulls by year that we released them for marketing. And in 2015, we had 33% of our Holstein bulls that we brought in that year were A2. In 2020, it was 56% of our bulls, and now here in 2023, we're running right at 70%. So, yeah, we've more than doubled the frequency or the number of bulls available with that A2 genotype here over the last 8 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's some pretty big jumps, and like you said, that's all driven by what your customers are asking for. So that's interesting, see that trend, knowing that that's what people are wanting, that's what people are trying to do. So can producers get to a fully A2 herd relying only on the breeding strategies and not actually testing anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Carlisle gave a nice overview of their process, and that's I think pretty similar to what others will experience. Selecting A2 sires is an important initial step in the process to move to a fully A2 herd. The longer you can keep introducing that A2 allele from on the sire side, the worse, or the fewer cows you'll need to cull in the later steps of the process. So many of our customers who don't yet have a market for A2 milk, but kind of see the trend coming and want to increase the frequency of the A2 cows in the herd, that's frequently the starting point of the process. But as Carlisle said, getting to 100% will take a long time. So to really move you that last step and take you to 100% herd, it's really going to require genetic testing of your cows to clearly identify which ones have the A2 genotype and which ones don't. And then after you identify that, then you have the option of either removing those cows from their herd or breeding them to beef bulls so they don't contribute to the next generation. And once you get to the point of having only A2 cows and using only A2 bulls, then you're on your way to a steady supply of regenerating your 100% A2 herd.
Right. And you bring up a good point too. This isn't a quick turnaround. It's not like you can wake up tomorrow and just say you have an A2 herd. This is genetic progress that takes potentially many generations to get to. And so it's something that if you're even remotely thinking about it, you probably need to start making some of those decisions now in preparation for the future, because it's going to take a little while to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
So, Carlisle, what kind of steps do you take to maintain the A2 status of your herd?
Well, now that we are A2, it's all on bull selection, basically. No bull, we don't buy anything that's not A2. And then we play with the genetics a little bit. Anything we buy on sales has to be A2 tested. And both, 4 years ago when we started this, it was a gamble if you're going to buy anything, and you really didn't. But now almost all the high genetic sales they're almost all tested, at least 90% of them. So that makes it easier. So that's basically the way to keep it that way.
So that's some value you see then, is you're looking for an animal that's already been tested. You're not going out and doing that test yourself. You're looking for somebody selling an animal that has already tested and verified her A2 status.
Yeah, on sales. If we're buying from like to keep the barn full, then yeah, we would go test before we bring them home, because we have had to dump some for a couple weeks, dump the milk just so we don't put A1 milk in the tank. But yeah, just the biggest thing is using the bulls.
Right. So what are some of the requirements or regulations that allow you to label your milk as A2?
We were a little worried about that because the A2 company has it patented and locked down pretty tight, but we actually contacted them and talked to them, and they really didn't care what we did as far as a label or anything like that. Probably because we're small, a drop in the bucket compared to them. But it might be different if a big company wants to go A2. I'm sure they would fight that a little more. But as far as us, they had no worries. They didn't care at all. And I think it helps for the more people that know about it, it helps them too for marketing.
That makes sense. Broadening the knowledge across the consumer base is going to help everybody that's doing it, not necessarily just you or just them.
Yep.
So speaking of the consumers, your family has a pretty strong connection to consumers through your creamery. Do they give you any indication where the dairy industry is or should be going when it comes to A2?
As far as the consumer, most people, a good chunk, don't know what it is. And so we have papers and flyers we hand out, and you got to explain it a lot. When we first finally made it to A2, we asked people, if you're lactose intolerant, to try it and fill out the survey. We'll give you milk to try it. And out of the 50 surveys, all but three were positive, that it didn't give them upset stomachs, and they were able to drink milk again. It also seems to help. We've had a couple people with Crohn's disease that have tried it, and it helps. Maybe not 100%, but it's better as far as that goes.
That's impressive. So you've essentially done your own research project to figure out, the truth behind A2, and it sounds like from what you found, it works. And there's definitely some value.
Works. Yep. In order to get people back to milk or keep drinking milk, we have to, as an industry, I think, head that direction to not push people away if they are lactose intolerant.
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable message. I know that's something that you guys have on your website. You talk a lot about it, and so it sounds like you guys are doing a lot to help get that message out there to the consumer. Really great. All right, so now I would like to open it up to questions from our audience. If you have a question, if you want, you could put it into our chat, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself, and then we can just ask the panel directly. All right, we've got a question in here that says, do we know Elevation's A2 genotype?
I assume that question's for me, but
I'm going to guess so. Not for me.
The answer is we don't. Obviously, this whole test and issue came out after his career was over, so we did not test him, and have not gone back and tested him either. So I do not know what Elevation's genotype is.
I've got another one here. Is A2 Corp the main source of published research on A2A2?
Is that for me or Chuck?
Whichever one wants to answer it.
No, there's some stuff on the internet that we found. There's a book called, I'm drawing a blank right now, The Devil in Milk. It's pretty dry, but it is very detailed and can basically tell you anything you want to know if you can stay awake reading it. There's no university data that we could find online about it.
Okay. Let's see. I've got another question in here. A couple years ago, I visited with a small dairy co-op in another state. Their producers were working toward A2A2. The manager asked, do you have to be 100% A2A2 to call your product that? What are your thoughts?
Is that for me again?
I would say so.
Okay. Yes. According to the A2 company, if one cow is in a truckload of milk, they can reject that load and they can test it and actually find it in there. So yes, you do have to be 100%.
I would say that sounds fair as far as truth in advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Another one here. What type of premium does A2 milk bring to farms like yourself, Carlisle?
For us, we did not charge any more or do not than what we did before. A2 milk in the store, I believe, is at least $5 a half gallon. They do charge, it's probably double of regular milk. For us, we did not charge anymore because we didn't want to turn away customers, and the whole idea was to grow milk sales, and we were afraid if we upped the price, that would slow that down.
Okay. Makes sense. Have you gotten much pushback on your milk prices at all in your store?
No. We don't.
Good.
We try not to up the price very, very seldom, and we have not gotten pushback.
Okay. Another question in here. What does it cost to test a cow for A2? I will take that one. So CentralStar does have a A2 test that we can perform on a blood, tissue, or milk sample. Regardless of sample type, the price on that test is $13.75 per animal. Got another question here that says, does all your milk go through your creamery, Carlisle?
Yeah. In the summertime, we don't ship anything. We haven't shipped since March, and today we shipped some. In the fall and the winter, we ship a little bit. We have some extra, but in the summertime, there is nothing.
Is that mostly because of ice cream sales being lower in the winter?
Yeah, once ice cream sales hit, it goes crazy then.
I bet. Any other questions? Like I said, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to chat, or we can throw them in the chat. We've got another in here. Is there a higher demand for A2 cheese? Say that's for you as well.
I do not know.
Okay. You guys were producing cheese at one point, is that correct?
We did cheese curds for a while. We don't anymore.
Okay. Another one, do you have to have 2 milk permits to ship your excess?
No.
Okay.
No, 1 permit.
Great. I've got one for you, Chuck. Do you see other casein genotypes following this same trend as A2?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do routinely test our bulls for the kappa casein genotype and the beta-lactoglobulin genotype, and do that because that is reported to have some benefits in cheese-making ability of the milk. So you want to look for the B variant of both of those, is my understanding of those are more favorable for cheese making, increases the cheese yield of the milk, as well as the curd formation, makes the curd formation go more quickly. But we haven't. There's been some attention given to the kappa casein variants of our bulls, and but that's been pretty steady and maybe hasn't taken off as much as we anticipated, or taken off as much as the interest in the beta casein genotype.
Great, thank you. Got another question in here that I'm not sure who will be able to answer this one. Does the same thing occur in goats? I don't know enough about goats to answer that myself.
Actually, I can.
Okay.
Dairy cows are the only animal or mammal that carries the A1 gene. All other mammals, people, whales, goats, anything else, has all A2. So that's why that milk doesn't bother the lactose intolerant.
Okay. Interesting. See, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Look, I am learning all sorts of things today.
Yes. So yeah, I think that's one of the credible things about promoting A2 milk, is that's sort of the wild type or natural version of the beta casein protein. And
Okay.
somewhere back in the development of dairy cattle breeds, there was a mutation that caused the A1 variant to appear, and just by chance happened to grow in frequency. But
Right.
the A2 is sort of the natural form.
Okay. Interesting. Very cool. And another question here, what options are available for testing through DHI, individual or bulk, and what's the turnaround time for A2 testing? So I'll take that one. So like I mentioned, for testing, we can do through DHI on a milk sample. There is the risk of a little bit more carryover when you're taking it through the parlor line, but that is something we can discuss with an individual customer on an individual basis. Our test is specifically designed for individual animals, so it's not something we recommend using on a bulk tank. And then the turnaround time for A2 testing is 10 business days from the time that we get that sample in our laboratories. Here's another one. How is the population A2 cow in Wisconsin, and how is the prospect for the next 5 years? Thinking like maybe what does that population look like, and what do we think it's going to look like?
Yeah, I'll start and jump in here, but I think the cow population tends to follow the bull population. So as we've increased the frequency of A2 in the bull population, that is sort of naturally going to happen in the cow population. Maybe lag a couple of years behind, but I'm sure the frequency is increasing as well. And the frequencies I was talking about in the bull population is on a bull by bull basis, but it's likely that our A2 bulls are more popular than the ones that aren't. So from a sales standpoint, the frequency of semen units that are A2 is probably even higher than what the frequency is in our bulls. So
That makes sense.
anyway, I'm sure it's increasing and probably approaching that 60 to 70% gene frequency rate in the cow population.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say in general, just in conversations that I've had with producers, especially within just the last year or so, I really see this trend continuing to grow. I talk to a lot of different types of producers, whether they be a larger herd or a smaller one, or a single cow, for personal family use, something like that. A lot more people are talking about this, and a lot more people are seeing the benefits. And I really expect this to continue to grow, not necessarily just because of there being more availability, but I think just more people are starting to talk about it, at least within the industry. All right, last call for questions. Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap things up today. Okay, so as we wrap things up, Like I mentioned before, I want to remind you all that CentralStar offers A2 testing in blood, milk, or tissue samples through both of our laboratories for individual animals at any age. Additionally, the Select Sires Federation identifies the A1-A2 status of bulls to help you make informed decisions to meet your herd goals. So if you'd like more information or are ready to get started with an A2 testing or breeding program, contact me or reach out to your local CentralStar team member. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone that registered for this event, which will contain the link to view the recording on our YouTube channel. This webinar series will continue with new content quarterly. The next episode is expected to take place in early 2024. If you'd like to register now, simply respond to the email that sent you the invitation for this episode or respond to the follow-up email you'll be receiving from me shortly. If you're watching this recording on our YouTube channel, hit subscribe button and change your alert settings to all so you get notifications whenever we publish new content. Also, follow us on social media like Facebook and LinkedIn to see our upcoming events. So I want to thank our speakers for taking the time to join us and thanking all of our audience members for joining us as well. And we will see you next time.